Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Kevin Moore Show. Now, if you want to stay up to date with all my latest videos, just click that subscribe button, as this really helps to support the show. So, if you're new to the show, I interview guests from a spiritual perspective, covering mainstream and alternative subjects, real-life inspirational stories, true crime, self-improvement, and much more. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Lionel Friedberg, who is an Emmy Award-winning film and TV producer and writer. Lionel grew up in South Africa and began his career at the first TV station in Central Africa in 1961. He has worked as a director of photography on over 18 feature films and written and produced and directed for National Geographic's, PBS, and national cable networks, including the Discovery Channel, A&E, and the History Channel. He's currently based in Los Angeles, California, and he joins me to discuss his book, Forever in My Veins: How Film Led Me to the Mysterious World of the African Shaman. Lionel Friedberg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate being with you, and I'm really pleased to be able to share whatever we need to discuss here today. Thanks for inviting me on board your show.
Well, Lionel, it's great to have you on. And I've never covered the subject of the African shaman, so this will be a new one for me. And obviously, I know that you've got a lot of interesting stories, so I'm sort of going to, just let you roll with what you want to say as well. So I think to start this off, just tell us the reason, why you wrote the book and the story behind it, and your story as well.
Well, I don't want to sound arrogant or boastful in any way, but I have had an extraordinary, colorful career. I've really been blessed with amazing opportunities in my career as a filmmaker, and I've been doing this for over 50 years. So I've been to all the continents of the planet and, made films on all kinds of subjects, from science to natural history to ethnographic, you name it. And I feel that I wanted to share that with the world because it's enriched my life so much. And I didn't want to just keep it to myself. I wanted to others to share. And what I learned from this was how amazing and extraordinary and uplifting this planet can be, despite all the problems that we're going through right now with the COVID virus and all the rest of it. There's always hope at the end of the tunnel, and there's always reason to be optimistic about things, no matter how dark the day may seem. And so I wanted to just get that message out to people. But also, I grew up in South Africa. I was born there and grew up during the height of the apartheid era. And that was very, very interesting at the time, because even as a child, I was very aware of the fact that this wasn't really the way people should be behaving. This fractured society with a wall built down the middle, and you keep the races apart to the extent that it existed in South Africa: separate bus stops, separate beaches, separate churches, separate entrances, just seemed inherently wrong. And I witnessed many incidents as a child. If you were a Black person and you were in a white area, and if you didn't have the right papers and permissions and pass, to be there, you could be arrested. And I saw that happen time and time again as a child. And I often asked my parents, I down the road today and I saw they just threw this man in the back of the van and drove off. And, you weren't allowed to talk about this because it was the law of the land, and you weren't allowed to question any of this. So it was very, very difficult. So eventually my folks left South Africa. I'd finished my education, and they moved from South Africa to what was then a British colony called Northern Rhodesia, way up in the north, right on the border of the Congo, the Belgian Congo. It was the year the Belgian Congo became independent, and the place was aflame with civil war. Nevertheless, my father took a position there to run a small store in a copper mining town, because he wanted to get out of South Africa, primarily because of the apartheid situation. And bless my mother, she used to take me to the movies, and I fell in love with the movies ever since I was a child, since I was 5 years old. And that's all I wanted to do, was to make films. And when they went up there, I thought, oh my God, I finished my school. I had a little movie camera. This is long before the days of video. Everything was shot on film, 8mm film. And I thought, wow, now here's an opportunity for me to go to Central Africa, darkest Africa as it still was thought of those days, adventure land, the unknown, the mysterious. I can start making movies up there. I mean, how naive can you be? I had absolutely no professional backing or background or anything of that nature, other than this incredible desire to make my own version of Tarzan and King Solomon's Mines and The African Queen and all of those wonderful movies that I adored as a child at the local theater down the road. And when I arrived there, I looked around and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Because all there was a small town, a copper mine, and an endless sea of jungle and bush from horizon to horizon. Certainly no film industry. What am I going to do? So that's the predicament I found myself in. And my dream was always to come and live in LA and make films in Hollywood. Now I now live in LA, and so that dream has also come true. But I looked around me and I thought, what am I going to do? My mother said, go back to South Africa, go and get yourself a degree, go back to university. I said, no, something's got to happen. Something has to be lurking in the shadows somewhere. I just feel it in my bones. And, one day I opened up the local newspaper. There was a local rag that served all these little copper mining towns. And in there was a little ad for staff for a new television station that was opening up. It was a British company was starting this television station, and it was only a few months away before it was going to go on the air. And I thought, this is like manna from heaven. And of course, I knocked on the door and I said, you have got to give me a job. I have got to work for you. I'll sweep the floors. I'll clean the windows. I'll do whatever you want. You've got to give me a job. And they did. And it was a menial position because most of the technicians and the production staff all came from the UK. But they gave me a job in the props room, looking after props, because there were 2 live advertising programs at night, what we used to call ad mags, and where you would have a live presenter and the local trading store or the local garage or the local, automobile dealer, whatever, would have a special on, and the host would sit there and say, well, this week there's a special on this product and that product and this car. And, so we had these 2 live advertising programs at night. So my job was to look after the props for these shows. And after 6 months of that, I went to the studio manager, who was a retired British Army captain. And I said, Mr. Salmon, unless you put me behind the camera, I'm leaving. And he said, I will try you out on one of the morning shows. Now, the morning shows were educational broadcasts in the vernacular, local vernacular to local black schools scattered around the area in the bush. There weren't enough teachers to go around, or classrooms for that matter. So they would broadcast educational programs in the morning, and in the afternoons they would broadcast what they would call cultural programs for local black communities, where you would have dancing in the studio, tribal music, traditional tribal music, and dancing and all that sort of thing. And it was absolutely wonderful. And then at night, the world would turn around and we would show the latest from Britain and the latest from America. So we'd have Hancock's Half Hour, and we'd have Leave It to Beaver and Bonanza and everything at night for the white community. So, one lived in the surreal world, and it was absolutely amazing. And of course, it was the time where Britain was giving away all its colonies, and it was the time for Northern Rhodesia to be given its independence. And so Northern Rhodesia was earmarked to become the Republic of Zambia in 1964. I started working at the station in 61, and those few years were absolutely wonderful. And when independence came, the government took over the station. The station was originally owned by a private company in the UK, and I think some South African money as well. Nevertheless, the government took it over, black government now, under Kenneth Kaunda. And all of the white staff at the station got pink slips to say, thank you very much, you've done a wonderful job, but your services will no longer be required. In 6 months' time, you're all out of here. You've got to train local black Zambian staff to take over your jobs. Well, we understood that. That was totally understandable. But my predicament was, what was I going to do, So anyway, we had this very wonderful young guy who worked for us. I still lived with my parents. And he wasn't much older than I was. His name was David Phiri, a Bemba man, a lovely man.
And how old was you at that time? What,
I was
22. Okay, yeah.
22. And so I was about 21, 22, thereabouts. So I went to him the next morning, David. I got back from the station very late that night, as I always did. The next morning, I went and I said, David, terrible things happened. I've been asked to leave my job. And he said, oh, no, that's terrible. And I said, it is bad because I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to go back to South Africa. We were all aware of the fact that apartheid was still alive and well and raging in all its ugliness back in South Africa. I didn't particularly want to go back there. And although there was a thriving film industry, even at that point, and I said to him, Dave, what am I going to do? And he thought for a moment, in between watering the garden and mowing the lawn and cleaning the dishes. And he said, let me think about this. And he came back a day later and he said, I found someone who may be able to give you an answer. So what did I know? This guy, what on earth could he provide to give me an answer as to do with my life? Nevertheless, I trusted him implicitly, and a couple of days later, there we were trundling along a little bush dirt road in my second-hand car, and we went to a little village on the outskirts of a town called Ndola, and at the edge of the village was a single house, and in there lived this little old, wizened, shrunken, old woman, a Bemba woman. And David, we knocked at the door, and she opened it up, and she ushered us into her house. And there were maybe two rooms in this house. The large room, the front room, which was sort of like a parlor area, if you like. There was a grass mat on the floor, and around the room on the walls were shelves containing all sorts of weird objects, little containers of powders and herbs and ground up bits and pieces of things and skins and barks. And it was clear that she was a practicing herbalist, diviner, soothsayer. These people wore many hats, basically a shaman. And I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. I wasn't going to believe a word of what this woman was going to tell me. And she spoke no English, but David was translating for me. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a fun afternoon. Anyway, she told us to sit down on the ground. And then she took this little bag, animal skin bag, and shook it like this. And then she handed it to me. And she said to David, and he translated, say your name into that bag, which I did. And then she sprinkled some snuff into it, which is ground up tobacco leaves, as an offering to her ancestors. Because the modality that the shamans use, it's always done through the ancestors. All their powers, all their capabilities, their diagnosing, their predictions, whatever else, it's all done with the help of the ancestors. So she made an offering to her ancestors by putting the snuff into the bag. And then she said to me, say your name, which I did. And she turned the bag upside down, and all these bones and stones scattered on the mat. And she leaned forward like this. And the very first thing she did was she pulled back in shock and horror and covered her face. She said, oh, what are these bright lights in my eyes? The minute and David said to me, she says she can't see anything because there are bright lights in her eyes. Why? What is that? The minute she said that, I knew that there was more to this woman than just hocus pocus, ooga booga, black magic, witch doctor nonsense. I better listen to what she says, because what she was seeing were the lights in the television studio. I knew that. And then she didn't stop for a moment. There was this endless flow of information coming out of her. She picked at these bones and she was looking at them. Now, of course, the way the bones fall, upright, upside down, one lying on top of the other, etc., all mean various things to the shaman. And she told me a number of things. And what's so amazing is that almost every single thing that she told me, and this is 60 years ago, have all come true. She even said to me, one of the first things she said to me was, yeah, you will have 2 wives. I had no intention at that point of even thinking of marriage. You will have 4 children. That was the last thing I'd even thought of. And then she said to David, she said, he will go across the big water and he will go in that direction. And she points to the north. I had no idea what she meant. And she went on and on with things like that. Now, I'm trying to scribble these little bits and pieces down on a piece of paper, but committing most of them to my memory. And it's only over the years, as these events came to pass, did I realize, what she was talking about. Nevertheless, I'm going to cut a very long story short by giving you one of the examples of what she said. This crossing the big water. Now, remember, Zambia is a landlocked country. It's sitting in the middle of Central Africa. There's no ocean there, right? So what's this big water she's talking about? And what am I going to do to cross the big water in that direction to the north? Well, It wasn't very long after that, because what I did was I did return to South Africa. There was nothing else for me to do in Zambia at the time. I did join the film industry, and I had a great time. And after a couple of years, I immigrated to Canada, as a matter of fact. The American embassy would not give visas to white South Africans at that time because of the apartheid situation. So it was very hard to get a visa. You couldn't even buy a visa at that time. There was a very stringent anti-apartheid movement in the States. And so white visas, forget about it. But the Canadians were wonderful, and they gave me a visa. And so I went to Canada. And the way I went was by ocean from Cape Town to Southampton. And then from Southampton, I was going to cross the Atlantic to Montreal. And one night, sitting on the deck, the top deck of the ship, the S.A. Vaal it was, I used to look at the stars every night, and every night the stars used to change, because it took 2 weeks to get from Cape Town to Southampton. So the stars were changing. This pattern of the sky was changing every night. And one night, I suddenly realized, oh my God, I can actually feel myself moving from one hemisphere to another. And you can see it in the stars. You know, the Southern Cross was getting lower and lower in the horizon. That's a very, very prominent star cluster in the Southern Hemisphere. And it disappeared beneath the southern horizon. And I suddenly realized one night, oh my God, I'm going from south to north, and I'm aware of this journey. And I'm also on the big water. This is what that woman meant. He will cross the big water to the north, which is exactly what I'm doing. That was the first incident that I realized what this woman had told me had come true.
And then when you went from Southampton to America, was that by boat as well? Was that by plane?
Well, there was a dock strike at the time. So this dock strike was absolutely chaotic in England. The year was 1966, and I had to sit it out in London. Thank goodness I had very good friends in London. I sat there for about maybe a month waiting. The dock strike didn't stop for a long, long time, but eventually they put me on an Aer Lingus flight via Dublin from London to Montreal. And so, you know, that was very good. And the thing about, you know, air travel and sea travel, in an aircraft, you get inside and then you get out and you're somewhere else. But by sea, you are aware of the fact that you are moving, you're going somewhere else, you know. But that is not what it's all about. The amazing thing about my interface with that dear old woman, whose name I don't even know to this day, and I wish I did. She said so many things that came true over the years. And here's some of the things that she said to me that made no sense whatsoever, but they all happened. She said, one other thing she said to David was, one day his work will take him to a white world. There is no color in this world. It is a white world, no color. There is no color at all in this world. And his work will take him to this place. What did that mean to me? Absolutely nothing. You know, I had no idea what she meant. She said to me, she said, be careful. One day you will be in the bush and there will be a great beast, and this great beast might kill you. You have to be very, very careful. Another example was, she said to me, you will also go on the big water one day in your work, and the water will try to take your life away. On and on and on. She went on about all of these things. But the most extraordinary thing she said to me was, there will come a time when you will meet a man who was very, very close to the most evil man who ever lived. Now, what on earth do you make of a statement like that? I had no idea. Well, all of these things came true. I once, I'm going to jump forward in time now. In 1990, I went on location to the Antarctic on a science documentary for PBS, the public broadcasting system here in the States. And it was a series called The Infinite Voyage. And we did a show called Secrets from a Frozen World, which basically looked at climate change and the ozone hole and what was happening to planet Earth. Because if you stick a thermometer into Mother Earth down in the Antarctic, you can see if the planet is healthy or not. Are the oceans becoming more acidic? Is temperature going up? Is there more methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere compared to hundreds of years ago? And it's very easy to find these things out. You drill into the ice, you remove trapped ice where there are trapped air bubbles in there, and you can compare 500 years ago to today. Is there more carbon dioxide in the bubbles 500 years ago compared to what's in the atmosphere today? And on and on. And what is it doing to the food chain? What's it doing to the ecosystem? What's it doing to the biomass down in the Antarctic? So there I was in the Antarctic, and it was Christmas Eve, 91 actually it was. And the captain stopped the ship that night, and everybody was partying, all the scientists and the crew and everybody, and the ship was stopped, this research vessel. And I was always a very, very copious note taker. And so I went to sit on deck, and, the hull was red. And other than that, it was white all around me. And I was making my notes to myself, obviously to use in the narration later on when I got back to the studio here in LA. And I was trying to describe in the book what it was like being in the Antarctic. And what I described it was like being in a big translucent shell. It was completely white. The sea was covered in pack ice. The sky was white. The sea was white. You were in this white world. There was no color. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, this woman foresaw that. You will go to a world where there is no color. It is only white. And again, it was a realization that she saw that in the bones on her floor in her hut. And the great beast that she talked about is that I was nearly trampled by an elephant on a safari film in Mozambique in 1967. I was on another research documentary in the 70s in the South Atlantic, where the ship almost capsized at sea because of a storm at sea. That's the great water trying to take my life. She saw all of these things. But the other thing, the most amazing thing was, this man, I will meet a man who knew the most evil man who ever lived, was I was doing a documentary on the history of South African Airways. And the airline started in 1929. It was privately owned. And then the guy ran out of money. His name was Mac Miller. And he ran out of money. So the government took it over. And they bailed him out. And then they renamed the airline South African Airways. So in 1934, it became known as South African Airways. And what they did was they ordered 3 new airliners from a German company. And these airliners had to fly all the way down from Germany, all the way down Africa to South Africa. And the year is its early 30s, remember. So there weren't many airfields. There weren't many refueling stops. And the range of these aircraft was only like 1,000 miles. And there was no weather forecasting systems. There were no radio stations on the way. So to do a trip like that was a big deal back in those days. And so I wanted to tell that story about the ferry flights of those aircraft. And in our research, we found out that one of the ferry pilots who flew one of these ferry flights was still alive. He was in his late 80s. I think it was in 88 or 89. And he was in retirement in a little town near Munich in Bavaria. And the minute I heard that, I said, we've got to interview this guy because, he must have a wonderful story to tell us. Not only that, we were told that he actually shot a home movie about that flight. So I thought, oh my God, we've got to get our hands on that footage, Anyway, it turned out that this guy was available, and with help from the Foreign Office in Germany, it was facilitated that we could go and interview this guy. We located his footage, which was in a lab in Frankfurt. And so during the production of that particular film, during the time it took when we got to Germany, I went to the lab, chose the footage from this amazing film that he shot. And now it was time for us to go down and interview him. And we were in Frankfurt. We had a translator with us who facilitated this whole interview. He's from the Foreign Office, plus various people from the aviation industry and, some publicists and whatever else. And we drove down in 2 vehicles to Munich, all the way from Frankfurt on the Autobahn. And the night before we get to his home in a little village called Ammersee outside Munich, the man from the Foreign Office in Germany who spoke perfect English, he was going to be my translator. At midnight, he said to me, how much do you really know about, this man's name was Hans Bauer, this pilot. How much do you really know about his history? And I said, well, not very much, other than the fact that he flew this ferry flight. That's all I'm interested in. He said, good, because I want you not to ask anything about the war. I said, no, I promise I won't ask anything about the war. Obviously, it was a sensitive issue. And he said to me that, he has a war injury. So don't bring up the war at all. Only talk about that ferry flight. And if you do that, we'll all be very happy about that. So I said, sure, absolutely, no problem at all. Nevertheless, so the night still wore on, and we were drinking some really good German white wine, and everybody was getting a little bit sort of sloshed. And around about 1 o'clock in the morning, he leaned over his glass and he said he wasn't satisfied with what I had said about not asking anything about the war. And he called me over and he said, but how much do you really know about this man? I said, well, what is there else to know, And he said, do you realize that this guy, Hans Bauer, was the personal pilot of Adolf Hitler? And when I heard that, I thought, well, I sobered up instantly. And I thought, wow, this is an opportunity that one doesn't get every single day of your life. How am I going to handle that one? Nevertheless, the morning arrived, and we were all sobered up at that point, of course. And we arrived at this little picture book house, and we welcomed at the door by his third wife, who he had married 3 times. And we get shown into his house. And there he was, this little guy walking on a cane. Obviously, he had a gummy leg or a bad leg, and I presume that was the war injury that was mentioned to me. And he sat down, we set up the interview, we set up the lights, set up the recorders, the boom mic, and all the rest of it. And we interview him about the flight. And he was wonderful, speaking in German. And the man from the Foreign Office was my translator. And when the interview was over, I knew I was going to get about 10 or 12 really good minutes out of this interview. And I said to him, thank you very much. Vielen Dank, danke schön. We're done. And he was kind of relieved to hear this. And then he got up and was on his cane, and he sort of hobbled, and he said to me, he called me over, and he took me to a little alcove on the side of the living room, and he pointed to a photograph on the wall. And in this photograph was him with Adolf Hitler in their uniforms. And in the background was one of the aircraft that we'd just been talking about. And he said, das ist eine U-22, that's one of the Ju-52s that we've been talking about. He didn't mention the other man in the photograph with him, the Hitler. But he saw me intrigued, very intrigued, looking at the photograph, and he sort of nodded his head, and he said, you want to know more? And I said, yeah, please. And he said, come with me. And we went back into the living room, we sat on the couch, and he called his wife over, and he said, bring me the photograph albums. So she brings the photograph albums out. His albums are beautifully bound, leather-bound albums. And he opens them up, and inside is a picture, a photographic record of the inner ranks of the Third Reich. Everybody who was Hitler's, compatriots during the Third Reich are in these images. And in a lot of the pictures, Hans Bauer, this man I've just interviewed, is always in the photograph, hovering in the background or sitting at the same table with Hitler. So, he tells me that he was very, very close to Hitler. They were very, very close friends. And Hitler confided in nobody except him. Hitler was always very, very nervous about being assassinated, by all of those close to him. He didn't trust anybody. But this guy was the exception. He confided in this man, totally, or so he says. And I kind of believe what he said, because he said Hitler was my friend. Excuse me. When he married his first wife, Hitler gave him his wedding party in Hitler's apartment in Munich. And they were friends ever since. And this was before the war. So he reveals this incredible world. And I'm sitting next to the guy who was that close, to Hitler. We'll talk about 6 degrees of separation. This is 1 degree of separation from one of the greatest tyrants and mass murderers of all time. And it was fascinating. I felt no animosity towards the guy. I thought of him only as a pilot doing his job. And, he was revealing his entire story, and it was absolutely fascinating. And at the end of the day, we'd wound up our cables and took all our gear and packed up the 2 vehicles that we were in, and we drove away, and he was outside the house waving goodbye. Apparently the limp that he had was sustained the night Hitler was in the bunker. He was in the bunker with Hitler the night Hitler decided to take his life. Before Hitler took his life, he was in the bunker with Hitler, and Hitler said, get out of here. The war is over. There's no future left for the Third Reich. Leave now. And he did, but he got shot by Russian invading troops who had just taken over Berlin that night. And that's what the limp was about. And the Russians arrested him and put him in a gulag for 15 years and gave him an artificial leg. And that's what the limp was all about. And anyway, as we were driving away from this house with this extraordinary experience of having spent an entire day with this man, he receded in the background. And as we turned the corner, he disappeared from view. And at that moment, it suddenly dawned on me, my God, this is what that old woman had seen decades before. You will meet a man who was very, very close to the most evil man who ever lived. That's what's just happened.
Did he talk about what he knew about what was going on in Germany at the time with well, not Germany, but with the Jews?
I did not ask. I did not approach. I was told not to ask these questions by the man from the Foreign Office, so I didn't ask any of those questions. If he well, obviously, he was. It was a sensitive issue, and not only to do with his war injury, but because of. I mean, it's still a very sensitive issue as it is today, and what he told me is what I accepted, and I didn't probe too much at all. But he didn't talk about the war or about Hitler's plans or his desire to make the Third Reich last 1,000 years or any of those things or the Holocaust. But what is pertinent and what remained with me was that this incident was foreseen by a little old lady who probably had no knowledge of the Second World War, living in a little hut in the African bush. That's what's so extraordinary about it. So that woman is my experience with this little woman in Zambia all those years ago is the glue, if you like, that holds my story together. And I tell much of my career and the films I've worked on in the book, Forever in My Veins. But the through line that holds it all together is what this little old lady had foreseen all those years ago.
So thank you for what you've shared there. So obviously, I know there was some illness that you suffered as well. Now, did you go back to the African shamanism to be healed for that? What did you do?
Well, here's the thing. In the 70s, when I was still living in South Africa, before I moved across to the States in the 80s with my family permanently from South Africa, I worked on a wonderful ethnographic series called The Tribal Identity, where we basically looked at all the major tribal groups in Southern Africa. And the series was made for a white audience because whites knew absolutely nothing about their black neighbors, absolutely nothing at all. Their cultures, their history, their spiritual beliefs, they knew absolutely nothing about it. And as far as the whites were concerned, these were laborers and people who were servants in their homes. They didn't know anything about their background or their long histories or the fact that there were actually African empires. That wasn't taught in school, not during the apartheid era. And so I was given a wonderful opportunity to make an ethnographic series about the tribes of South Africa with an anthropologist by the name of Peter Becker, a terrific guy who could speak a number of the vernacular languages in South Africa. And when I made the series in the 70s, it was 1975, 74, 75, we shot most of it. We met lots and lots and lots of shamans in South Africa. They go by the name of Sangoma. And a Sangoma can be a healer, a doctor, a fortune teller. You can find, lost property, can tell you why your marriage is going wrong, can diagnose an illness and prescribe some kind of medication for it and compound and make the medication him or herself. They wear many hats. They do all sorts of extraordinary things. And the medium that they use is guidance from the ancestors. And the way they speak to the ancestors is through the bones. So I did 2 of the shows in this 8-part series that I did basically dealt with their spiritual beliefs and their and the role of the Sangoma in black cultural societies throughout South Africa. And one learned an awful lot because what did we know about that? Absolutely nothing. And so I developed a great respect for these people because I had seen many, many people healed. I saw a woman arrive at one particular Sangoma one day, and she was crazy. She was possessed. It was straight out of The Exorcist, the movie. She was like that. And this man performed a ritual on her with water and drums and doing various rituals around her and dancing and music and whatever else. And at the end of the day, she was clearly cured of whatever was going on inside her, so it was like an exorcism. But I'd seen people healed. I'd seen people made better. I had witnessed these transitions from childhood to adulthood and the role that the Sangoma plays in tribal society in order to help young people transcend to maturity, to adulthood, and to have respect for the ancestors. It's all about the ancestors. And I developed a great respect for all of this, and it was absolutely fascinating. So, with that background, in answer to your question, in 1995, I think it was, I was sitting in my living room here in LA, watching television. It was a lovely, hot Californian evening. And I had a friend who lives up the road in Santa Barbara who's a general surgeon, white man, and he's the same age as me. And he practices up there as a surgeon. But he was also fascinated by the rituals of the shamans, the sangomas in South Africa. And he'd gone back many, many times to study their methods, particularly what they use for medicinal purposes, how they go into the bush and the wild blue yonder and come back with herbs and berries and sticks and barks and all sorts of bits and pieces and compound them into medication that heals people. We're not talking about big pharma here. We're talking about going out into the boondocks and bringing back medication for patients. And he wanted to find out what it was that they looked for, what plants are used for what purposes. He was fascinated by all of this. So anyway, I was sitting in front of the television one night, and my wife, and I was wearing shorts, and my wife looked over and she said, "Why are your ankles so swollen tonight?" And I looked down and I said, "Oh my God, yeah, you're right, they're swollen. What's that all about?" So I went to see my general practitioner, my GP, and he took one look at me and he said, "You've probably got one or two things wrong with you. You've either got a heart problem or you've got a kidney problem. Go and see this guy." And he sent me to a nephrologist, a kidney specialist. And after a biopsy, a week later, it was discovered that I had a chronic kidney disease. My kidneys were failing big time. It was an autoimmune disorder, and my immune system was basically destroying my kidneys for some weird reason. They call it, in medical terms, idiopathic. In other words, I have no idea what's causing it. My doctor said to me, "Have you ever been bitten by bugs, centipedes, spiders?" I said, "Yeah, of course. I lived in Africa all those years. I did all those things. I swam in filthy, dirty rivers and filthy pools. I've eaten, ghastly things, filthy, dirty food. All of those things I've done." Why? He said, "Because something latent may be lying within your system that's triggered your immune system to turn against you. We don't know why this is going on. And the only cure he could offer me was to suppress my immune system, to stop it from behaving so badly. In other words, to stop it from destroying my kidneys." So I went on this immunotherapy regimen, and it was awful. It was really awful. So I told my friend, who was this surgeon that I was telling you about earlier, who had studied the ways of the shaman in Africa, I told him that, and he said, "Lionel, don't think me crazy, but I'm going back to South Africa in a couple of months, and I'm going to do another study session with my teacher in Swaziland, which is a little country that sits between South Africa and Mozambique." And he said, "Why don't you come with me? Because maybe he might be able to find an answer for you. Maybe we can find a Sangoma in South Africa who can help you." I said, "Dave, you are a surgeon. You lectured at Stanford University, and you're telling me to go and talk to a witch doctor to find a cure?" And he said, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you to do." And I said, "Okay, you're on." So I put a camera under my arm and I went back with him to South Africa. And that's how my healing process took another turn. Not only did I continue with the Western allopathic medication, but I met a lot of really amazing sangomas who all diagnosed my illness. They basically went straight to the point. And they said, "It's your internal organ and it's your kidneys and they're failing." That was told to them in the bones. Without exception, they all said that to me, about 5 or 6 different ones. One man, this is the teacher of my friend who was instructing him in the ways of of how to make medicine, said to him, he knows an even more powerful shaman, and Lionel should go and see that guy. And so it was arranged that I would go and visit this man at his, what they call a kraal, which is really a settlement in the boondocks. And this man was going to perform what they called a femba. A femba is virtually an exorcism. And I went along to this guy one night in a Land Rover with my friend Dave. And I was taken into this hut where all these women were drumming, and there was a fire in the middle of the hut. They were all drumming, and there was, this throbbing music going on. And this man arrived, and he was possessed by it seemed to me as though he was possessed by some kind of animal, because his eyes were fiery red. He was dressed in his shaman uniform, rattles, beads, and whatever else. And he turned into what I think was almost a hyena. and he started to walk on all fours across the floor towards me, grunting and snorting like a hyena. And when he got to me, he started smelling me all over my body. And when he got to my kidneys, he started to retch. He became physically ill, and he vomited into a barrel, as though he was vomiting my illness out of me, which he'd taken on board from me. And, I told this to my surgeon, to my nephrologist, when I got back to LA. And of course, he laughed at me. And he said, I've never heard of this poppycock in my life. But, it's so many years ago. And my nephrologist told me many, many years ago, you're either going to be on dialysis or you're going to be dead within 10 years. And I'm not. I'm still here to tell the tale. And he said, well, clearly, whatever you did in Africa has had an effect on you. There's no question of that. So, again, I have been healed by those people. I have experienced it myself. I've seen it happen on other people. And all I can tell you is that there is a modality outside of our system that goes beyond what we in the West really know. And it's extraordinary.
No, absolutely. I get that with what it's done for you.
The knowledge of those people, which goes back thousands of years, nothing is written down. It's taught at the feet of elders. It's, taught in the bush over a period of years, and it works.
It obviously has worked for you. Now, did you feel drawn to go back or to try to find the original lady that, all those years ago? I mean, she probably wouldn't have been alive by then anyway.
But... No. I have not been back to Zambia for decades. And as I say, I don't even know her name. But a number of the other sangomas that I've seen, of course, I know their names, the ones I saw later.
Yeah, well, I was actually referring to when you went to go get that session, or the what would you call it? Would you call it a healing?
Exorcism.
Exorcism, right? Okay.
Yeah. The term that they use is femba. It's a Swazi word. Swazi is closely aligned to Zulu, and femba means cleansing.
Yeah.
To exorcise.
So let me just get this in my small head then. When you went back to get the exorcism, what city was that in, and where was that distance-wise from the first person that you actually went to?
Oh, it was in another country. As I said, it was in Swaziland. The first time I met that woman was in Zambia. Yeah. Different countries. Shamans are found all over Africa. West to east, south to north, they're all over, and they all have different ways of healing, but they all, without exception, use the bones to communicate with their ancestors. It's all about the ancestors.
Okay, so is shamanism in Africa recognized at all by any sort of
today? Well, during the apartheid era, when the whites were in control of the country, people just regarded people like that as being, witch doctors, forget that, ignore them. That's just another witch doctor doing his juju magic. Today, if you're a Sangoma and you're a practicing Sangoma, you are officially recognized by the Department of Health. You are recognized as a medical practitioner, and you are totally recognized by the system. And, you have a certificate to say who and what you are. And if you see clients and you throw bones without using, Western allopathic systems, you are recognized.
Okay. Am I using the right words there when I say African shaman? Is that what they're called? Or is that what you were
the term in South Africa for these shamans are Sangoma. 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 It's a Zulu word.
And if obviously, people are living outside, like we live in America, you can't find an American Sangoma, can you?
You can, of course. We have North American, Native American tribes here who are equally powerful and equally capable. In South America, whether you go to Peru or you go to Brazil, as I have, or you go to Ecuador into the Brazilian rainforest, there are shamans there too. They use totally different systems and different methods. The African way is through the ancestor and through the bones. In South America and here in North America, it's different. They don't do that. They use other ways.
What makes these bones so special, do you think?
Well, every Sangoma has to have certain bones in their set. Each one has his or her unique set. But you have to have a bone of a lion, a goat, a crocodile, a hyena. I think there's a couple of antelopes in there. And then you can add your own selections, your own bones to that set. They're all small, they're not large bones, or pebbles or trinkets or whatever. Some of them, use little charms or little old coins, whatever communicates with them, whatever gives them a link to the ancestral realm is what they use.
Have you used one since the illness and the exorcism that you had?
Oh, many times, yes. Yeah, many times.
By
Yeah,
when you've
yeah.
traveled back or over
When
here?
I've gone back,
When you've gone back.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't. Here, there's no, other than my friend, the surgeon. He's got his own bone set, and he uses them, and he's pretty good at it now. He's absolutely amazing. And he's a surgeon. He does surgery in the mornings. Then he goes home in the afternoon and he consults people in his ndumba, which is his medicine hut in his garden, and throws the bones. Yeah.
That's incredible. Mind you, you've met some incredible people on your journey. When we go to your website is?
It's lionelfriedberg.com, one word, Lionel, Friedberg.com, lionelfriedberg.com. I just threw a few things on there to give people some idea, because I just wanted to share my journey with others. It's about that. I wanted people to realize that there's so many amazing things out there in this incredible planet we live on.
Well, what if we don't get chance in our lifetime, or for whatever reason, as much as this is fascinating, your story, and the African shaman is an incredible thing. If we can't get a chance to see that sort of person in our lifetime, or even when we're suffering in the moment now with whatever it is we're going through, what is another alternative to that?
Well, I found what really helped me a great deal was changing my diet, becoming vegan. I think has played a great role in maintaining a healthy body. But I also meditate twice a day. And anybody who says, "Well, what can I do?" I can't go to Peru, and I can't go to Brazil, and I can't go to Ecuador, and I can't go to Wyoming, or I can't go to Nebraska to meet an African, a Native American healer, or a Navajo in Arizona. I say to them all, go within yourself, because the answers lie within you. You all have within yourself the signposts that you need. Go and learn to sit in a quiet place, uncluttered, no distractions, and just go within yourself for like 10 or 20 minutes a day. I do it twice a day, in the morning and at night, every day. And I just make a connection with whatever entities, if you like, on the spiritual realm that are around all of us, and we all have that. We all have guides, we all have spirits. Make a connection with those through meditation, and a lot of the answers will come to you. It might sound like hocus pocus, but believe me, it works.
And it could be your voice that's coming back to you, but it's that wiser aspect of yourself, isn't it?
Of course. And I am very aware of the fact, I think, that my grandfather on my father's side, who I never met, by the way, is somehow or another still very much connected with me. And the Sangomas in South Africa saw that, and they said, your grandfather wants to help you. He's around you. Now, I'd never met the guy. My grandfather lived in Latvia, died years before I was born. My father emigrated to South Africa from Northern Europe. And they say, your grandfather on your father's side is around you, and you need to use a walking stick. That represents him. And every time you go for a walk, every time you go outside, every time you go, I love going to the Mojave Desert and walking in the desert. I love to do that, particularly at night, and look at the stars. But during the day, I just love walking, getting lost in the Mojave Desert. I love that. And when I do that, I take this walking stick, and I believe I'm walking with my grandfather. And I know that he, in some way or another, on a realm or a level that is very difficult to describe or understand, he's with me. His spirit is there.
Yeah, I totally I'm with you on that, and if that's what you feel and that you believe, are you able to communicate with him? Do you think when you go into those meditative states that you, or if you ask for help, do you think that you would hear something back, and it could be
I've
him?
never actually heard what could be his voice, because I have no idea what he might sound like. But I think in dreams, very often, I think we've encountered one another in dreams, because when you dream, you can there is such a thing as astral travel. I made a film called Beyond Death a few years ago, in the 90s, actually, for one of the cable companies here. I think it was the A&E channel or the History Channel, one of those, and it was a 2-hour special which looked at what happens to consciousness after the demise of the physical body. And this wasn't, looking for ghosts and sounds that go bump in the night. But what is there scientific evidence that consciousness exists outside of the physical body? And if so, can you measure it? And how do we find out if it's there? And I worked with some amazing institutions and individuals, including Dr. Robert Jahn, who's passed on now, unfortunately. He was at Princeton University, and with organizations like the Monroe Institute in Virginia. They've done incredible work in this field. And so we know that consciousness, if you like, or other realms exist outside of our physical bodies. And I've met many people who've had near-death experiences. They're all in my show. I interviewed them, including children, 5, 6, 7-year-old children. And so I think that maybe in one's dreams, you can travel and you can experience these higher realms or other realms. But in the ideal way, you would be to be able to turn that on willingly, to just go and meditate very quietly in a corner and turn it on and get to that realm. And I think it's absolutely possible. Anybody can do that.
And when you talk about these documentaries that you've made throughout your career, I mean, you're talking about these companies that have spent, a fair size of cash to produce these documentaries.
Oh, to say the least.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, traveling and and film people and everything else like that costs a lot of money.
It does indeed.
Yeah,
it does indeed.
It does. So on your website though, you've also got many pictures as well of some of the incredible people that you've met on your journey and worked with as well, just for different projects.
I do. Yeah. I think one of my favorite shows, which people can check out, there's a little bit of it there, was a thing called Sail on Voyager, which is all about the Voyager interplanetary spacecraft that was sent from the Earth to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And these are the only 2 craft. There were 2, both launched in 1977. One eventually left the solar system going in a sort of southwesterly direction, the other one in a northeasterly direction. And the one is, they're both still traveling. They will never stop. Most of the interplanetary spacecraft that have been launched from the Earth either collided with one of the moons or crashed onto one of the moons or went into a decaying orbit around a foreign body, a foreign planet, but not Voyager. The Voyagers keep going, and they will keep going forever. They will never stop. And, they each carry a gold record on the side. And on this gold record is imprinted a graph, a diagram, which shows the planet, where we are, where our sun is, and where our planet is in relationship to the sun. To any potential alien being who may encounter this, to understand where we come from. And on this gold record are imprinted digitally images and sounds of planet Earth. So if one of these spacecraft are ever encountered by an alien species who are able to take these discs off and play them, they can see what our planet looks like and what our sounds are like, what our music is like, what nature sounds like. These are our calling cards. This is mankind's non-ending calling card that will keep going forever. And, when you work on a project like that and you realize how immense the universe is, and that we have a presence out there and will be going forever for 40,000 years before the spacecraft gets to the next sun. I mean, it's astonishing, widens one's horizons. And it gives you a great feeling of being, great humility. But it shows what we're capable of doing and being as a species.
Well, I mean, when you just look up the sky at night and you think of a universe that is infinite, that doesn't end, that goes on forever, it's really, as I say in past shows, difficult to get your head around that.
Yeah, well, now the scientists, of course, are talking about the multiverse. It's more than one universe.
Yes, that as well, the multiverse. And what the implications of that potentially is just beyond, comprehension.
But we're all part of this, and we're all on this journey of discovery. And one thing's for sure, there is no such thing as death. Yes, there becomes a time when the body decays and we're gone, but that doesn't mean to say that that's the end of the road. We keep going, and we are all on a cosmic journey without any question. And as I say on the very last page of my book, I think that there is some kind of invisible grid, if you like, or field that connects the entire cosmos together. And we all somehow or another, and this has been proven to be time and time again, many shows that I've done, we're all connected to this invisible grid, whether, as I say in the book, whether you're a person or a petunia or a pony, you're connected to that grid. And we're all interlocked and interlaced in some weird and wonderful way. And our journey is non-ending. It goes on and on and on and on and on, and there is no death. There's just the demise of one physical state and then a transition to another.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. And I guess the journey that you've been on with many sort of many, I guess, spiritual practices that you've looked at, and that you've considered as well, and the great people that you've met on your journey who have gone to show the potential of what we can do when we put our minds to something as well. I mean, you've met Neil Armstrong and a few others.
Yeah.
That must have been incredible.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, I did a show on this predates Ancient Aliens, which has been one of the most popular shows on television. But long before Ancient Aliens took the world by storm, I did a show called Ancient Encounters, or Ancient Alien Encounters, something like that, for the History Channel. This was in the mid 1990s. I did this as a series with Leonard Nimoy, and we looked at examples of unidentified flying objects and possibly alien beings that were encountered going right back to ancient Egyptian times, well, even Sumerian times. And, we have artwork and we have images in there that look at these things. And I interviewed Gordon Cooper. Now, Gordon Cooper was one of the original Mercury astronauts when the United States started its space program, right? This predates Apollo. There was Mercury, then there was Gemini, then there was Apollo. And Gordon Cooper, I interviewed him, and and he said to me, we were told not to ever talk about any of these things, that there are alien beings and alien spacecraft visiting our planet. And we were told as astronauts not to talk. We're all sworn to secrecy. I have broken ranks. And I am quite prepared to talk about this in the open. And he's in the movie. He says this. And when he was a pilot at, I think it was Ramstein Air Base in Germany, before he was chosen as a Mercury astronaut, one day they were scrambled, he and I think another jet, F-86 Sabres. They were told to chase this ball. And he went up there and he said, yeah, there was this disc, and this disc was doing things. It was doing things that was physically impossible for any man-made object to do. We tried to chase it. We tried to chase it down. Absolutely no way. It stopped dead still in the atmosphere. When we reached it, it shot off at the speed of about thousands of miles an hour and then came to a dead stop, and he said, I witnessed it myself. I know they're out there. And since then, of course, I have met many, many people who have had lots of encounters with what they say are alien entities. And I think an alien entity has been visiting the Earth for probably, who knows, millions of years. Wouldn't surprise me.
Didn't you have your own sort of UFO encounter?
I did. I photographed a UFO in Canada in 1966. And, that was sent to Project Blue Book at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base when it was under the direction of J. Allen Hynek. And once they got the film, then they denied ever receiving it. They said, we've lost it. We don't know anything about the film. They denied getting it. So is there a conspiracy? No, but is there a cover-up? Definitely. And I think, the time is probably coming where there will be disclosure that they're here. The aliens are here, and they've been here for a long, long time. And that may sound like sci-fi rubbish, but it's not. They're here.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, when you look at the Tic Tac and just a few other cases, I mean, they do stand up to being something, don't they? And
absolutely,
yeah. And there's so many people with sightings that credible people as well in authority, all the time. So
all the time.
Yeah, I would say that's so true. You've obviously done this book so far, and it's a great book what you've done. and that's available. The book is from Amazon and all good bookstores. But do you see yourself ever doing another book?
I've got one coming out in July. It's a history of aviation in Africa, and how Africa was linked to the rest of the world through aviation. It's called The Flying Springbok. It's a history of South African Airways. It's a wonderful story. It's an amazing story, actually. And so that one will be available in July. I've just checked the galley proofs. They've done a terrific job on the book. So anyone interested in aviation or even colonialism, there's a lot of history of colonialism in there as well. So it's published by Kronos Books, which is one of the imprints of John Hunt Publishers, and it's a very detailed history of colonialism, of South Africa, of apartheid, and aviation. But it really is all about aviation and how aviation has developed over the years. I'm pretty proud of that book, and that's due out in July.
Yes. Well, how would you sum up your work then? If there was an important message, what would that be, do you think?
That we need to become more open-minded, that we need to become a little more tolerant than we are, that we need to, I always use the analogy of a lens. Take off your telephoto lens and put on a wide-angle lens, and just increase your vision. Just increase your span, your horizons, if you like, and be open-minded. Don't be gullible. Don't believe everything you hear, because that leads to conspiracy theories and a whole lot of rubbish, particularly the sort of nonsense purveyed by so much on the internet today, of which there is so much junk. But be open-minded enough to consider the possibilities of all sorts of things, whether we're talking about connecting with the ancestors, or whether we're talking about being visited by alien species from alien worlds, whatever it may be, or that you can heal yourself without having to undergo, stringent medication and other processes. Just start thinking outside of the box. Widen your horizons, widen your vision, and at the same time, be respectful of what you don't understand. And I think we need to be a little more respectful of one another's cultures. I've certainly learned that much. That's for sure.
Oh, yes. Yes, we do. Yeah, even, well, especially with what you went through, experiencing, your sort of childhood through that lens, with apartheid. It must have been so different times, different times that probably, nowadays, we don't appreciate, do we, so much of what happened in the past when it comes to that.
No, we don't. And yet racism is as alive and well today as it ever was, as we see all the time.
Yeah, but as you've said, when you cross over, you're not crossing over with this body. No matter what race you are, we're all the same at that deeper core level.
Absolutely. And I think, by the way, and I also think we have to learn to become a little less anthropocentric in our conceptions and in our comprehension of things. We have to become a little more respectful of other life forms as well. I worked on a wonderful series for National Geographic called The Shape of Life, which dealt with the development of the phyla. What makes a worm a worm? What makes a skeleton a skeleton? Why do some animals have shells? Why? What is it in science that creates these different body plans, if you like? And so you develop a great respect for how nature works, and how the biological systems come to be the way they are. And so you develop a great respect for other life forms which are alien to yourself. An octopus and a pig and a dog have very similar levels of intelligence. Well, we don't think along those lines. And I think the way we view the non-human world is pretty terrible today, particularly with industrialized agriculture and factory farming. It's just absolutely horrific. And one day we're going to look back on this period as being a very, very savage era.
Yeah, I think one of the ways as well, which you've probably talked about before, of coming back into a bit more balance, or when you've got something that you're going through some sort of illness, is that, obviously routines are important, but just getting back to nature as well is just as important.
The most important thing of all is take that tablet, take that game set away from the kid for a day, and take him out or her out into the forest, go for a walk, go for a canoe trip down the river, go to the park, Go and touch nature. Go and see the mountains. Unplug all those electronic devices. Get the kids away from those screens for one day a month. It will make a huge world of difference to the way people see the world and their place in it.
Yes, of course it will. Obviously, with going through the journey that you've gone through, you've also been on a spiritual search as well. And what are some of the more important sides of what your spiritual search has been as well? What is it sort of?
Well,
what have you discovered, would you say?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that we've got to get over this anthropocentric view of ourselves. We think of us as being the top of the heap, but we're not. The fact that we have opposing thumbs, which allows you to hold a wrench and a hammer and a tool, doesn't make us better than anything else. So the way we treat the rest of the animal kingdom is appalling, simply because we're more intelligent. We may be the dominant species, but that doesn't make us better or superior. And we've got to bring a little more compassion into our lives, particularly when it comes to the horrific industrialization of the production of animal foods for human consumption.
Well, just look how much consumption happens. Well, pre-COVID as well. I mean, it's still happening now. Or maybe it's maybe it's a bit less, but I wouldn't have thought so. Really, even just me saying those words. Just think how much chicken gets consumed. Just in America per day. I mean, it's a lot, and that's a lot of. I mean, if the animals were in fair conditions and were treated better, then maybe we wouldn't have some of the problems we've got now.
Well, look at the whole COVID thing. People may want to deny this, but if it did start in that horrible so-called wet market, and wet market only means a live market in Wuhan in China. That's indicative of what goes on. I mean, I have seen places like that all over the world. And the way the animals are treated, it's just absolutely horrific. And the consumption of wildlife is just, we have to be very, very careful of that, because these illnesses jump from species to species. Whether it's Ebola or whether it's a virus like the one we're dealing with at the moment, is it animal source? Is it animal based? If we didn't behave that way, I don't think we'd have this crisis at the moment.
I would happen to agree with you there, absolutely. Yeah. Do you see us changing?
I can only hope so. And I feel confident when I see young people around me, the way they behave and the way they react to all of this. I think most people over the age of 35 are kind of set in their ways, and it's difficult. But young people are a source for me of optimism and a belief that, yes, it is ultimately possible that we will change, but alas, not in my lifetime, and maybe not in my children's lifetime. But I certainly think that the time will come where we're going to look back at this period with absolute horror. It has to change, or we're doomed as a species.
Absolutely, we are. Well, listen, Lionel, your website one more time is
lionelfriedberg.com, and the name of the book is Forever in My Veins.
Yep, that book's been coming up on the screen. There it is, just right there as well. You've got it in your hand. Well, it's also in the link in the description, as well as your website is there, so that people can check you out. Lionel, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today.
Kevin, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and all the very best to you. And stay warm up there in Wisconsin.